So for this question, we're looking at taking a rate and relating it to some other information, some extra hours. So there's a couple ways of doing a question like this. Let's take a quick look at them both and you can decide which makes most sense to you. So first of all, what we could do is we could say she is making $90.20 for 5.5 hours of work. And that's perfectly good. And we could calculate that out as a unit rate, which we'll show in a second. Or another way is we could just say, well, let's come up with an equivalent rate. And we would say, well, what would it have to be in order to be out of 44? In other words, the same rate, she's getting paid the same rate. And if we're talking about a different amount of hours, we would be saying, well, what would we have to multiply 5.5 by in order to get 44? And so we think that, well, I guess we could just take 44 divided by 5.5 and throw that into your calculator if you wish. And we would say, oh, well, that's times 8 on the bottom in order to get that. So rates, ratios, whatever, we know that if we multiply the bottom by 8, we're going to have to multiply the top by 8. And so what we could say is just looking at that, 8 times $90.20, and probably throw that into a calculator, and $721.60. So that's one way to do it. Some people might find this way a little more comfortable, is you stop and you just say, okay, well, let's come up with a unit rate. So pretty much the same starting point. And calculate that out right at this point and determine that her current wage is $16.40 per hour. And so some people would say, oh, I'd prefer to write that as $16.40 per hour. And so where you put the dollar sign, whether in front or in the ratio itself, it's understood to be the same thing. And so now we know what her regular wage is. What we can do is we can just say, okay, well, let's take that wage. And that's in, here, let's write it like this so that canceling makes more sense, looks a little more simple. And 44 hours, and we double check, was multiplying the right thing to do? Well, we have an hours on the bottom and an hours on the top. So yeah, those cancel out and we're left with dollars, which is what we want. How much would you make? So 1640 times 44, and we come up with 721.60. And so again, either way of doing it, perfectly good. A lot of people would prefer this way just from a conceptual point of view. Certainly, you may look at it and say, well, it has a little tiny bit extra work, but it makes sense just to say, well, what is her regular wage, hourly wage, and then take that hourly wage and figure anything out from there. So yeah, from that point of view, a lot of people would prefer that way, but either way is good.